Music is India's beating heart. It keeps alive the soul of this young nation. It's everything from mainstream culture to regional folklore. This is not the story of popular music in India. It's about those unpopular few who rocked out in the face of adversity. My name is Arjun S. Ravi, and I'm one of the unpopular ones. As a former failed musician and a music journalist for over a decade, I've written about and covered our country's independent music scene. I've seen it grow from small beginnings to a legitimate industry that has festivals, tours, and even buses, bringing a new dimension to the sound of India. Through this series, you will see and hear hundreds of stories that fill up this untold chapter in India's history. This is the story of how we got here. The 70s was a difficult decade for artists playing Western music in India. They had very little encouragement to even begin to consider making a living through it. But slowly and steadily, kinda like how India as a whole was moving past the dreary 70s, scenes were popping up all over. There was blues in Shillong, rock and roll in Mumbai, and by the 80s in Calcutta, a unique twist was being given to mainstream pop. Most stories of Indian rock that have reached legendary level of coolness are inextricably linked to a venue. And few venues in the country were as fabled as a sprawling open-air amphitheatre in Mumbai that was host to some of the biggest names in rock music at the time.
Rang Bhavan is ace. It's the best venue in the world.
Some of the best music was, I think, at Rang Bhavan.
I mean, it had other kinds of screw-ups and sound issues and stuff, but it was just a great place.
The only outdoor venue that we had in Bombay.
There was a clear intention in the minds of the guys who were, building the structure that no, we have to have a great stage, we have to have green rooms.
Today, if you have to do the same kind of show somewhere else, you have to do barricading, you have to do a stage, you have to do security, which was not necessary. And that's what made Rang Bhavan a happening place.
I think Rang Bhavan for me was more a venue that I wanted to play, and IROC was like a goal.
In 1985, two Bombay bands, Mirage and Rock Machine, were scheduled to play at St. Xavier's College. When one of the college's Jesuit faculty objected to the gig being held in the college, a student decided to move it to Rang Bhavan next door. But when the bands got to Rang Bhavan, this guy was nowhere to be found. Farhad Wadia of Mirage and Mark Selvin of Rock Machine decided to go ahead with the gig anyway. So they sold tickets and kept the name of the gig. Thus, Independence Rock was born. Wadia continued to run Independence Rock for nearly 3 decades, and it was to many young Indians, including myself, the first proper introduction to Indian rock.
I guess if you want to sort of go back and get any sort of historical document of what the scene was like, your first reference point would be IROC.
I remember watching Pentagram, Brahma, Parikrama. I, in general, was introduced to what was then the scene. It felt like a vampire convention. A lot of them wore trench coats. Everyone wore black. So many of them had long hair and they were grown men. Some of them came on Enfields.
It was for us like a rock and ring. It was for us like a download. It was for us a Glastonbury.
You could smell the weed in the air. You could see it. It was palpable. You could touch it.
There was a Parikrama banner, man, that spanned about 20 people. I've never seen that as a live musician in my life.
And everyone was there for that one thing, to get fucking smashed and listen to rock music.
It just felt very, very powerful. It felt like, and it also felt like something grown-ups won't understand. It was very clear.
When I heard we got selected to play IROC, and I was like in disbelief, like, oh my God, I'm gonna be on stage at IROC this time.
And it's not a very large venue, so 7,500 people packed into a venue. And that energy, when it hits you on a stage, which is again not very large, you're like, okay, there's something happening over here. And you completely go into a different zone.
It was really irritating in the beginning when you tried to play your original music and people throw tomatoes at you and all that stuff happened, bottles and all. But I think it brought people together.
There were more wow moments in Indian rock in the 80s, including a benefit concert for the Bhopal gas tragedy victims in 1985. Our very own Live Aid 8 Bhopal took place at the Brabant Stadium in November of that year. Over 10,000 people are estimated to have turned up for the gig. It saw performances by some of the biggest proponents of rock and pop music in India at the time, including Remo Fernandez, Rock Machine, Gary Lawyer, and many others.
They pulled off a phenomenal feat. I mean, Brabant Stadium out there with this massive stage, huge turnout, and so many bands there. So many bands just coming and doing their thing. So when we got on stage, it was fantastic. It was a hell of a rush.
Rock music in India has always had a hard time, and the story of the legendary independence rock was changed in 2003. The Bombay High Court put Rang Bhavan in a silence zone, owing to its proximity to a college and a hospital. Despite Farhad Wadia's best efforts, the Indian legal system was unrelenting. Since 2003, no amplified concert has taken place at one of the country's best live venues.
I'm very unhappy that venue got shut.
I mourn the loss of that. Everything was ready-made. It was a great vibe.
I personally cannot enjoy any other venue in Bombay.
You really value these things when they're gone. You take them for granted when you have them. Rang Bhavan was there.
Farhad was really, really passionate about. He wanted to go and just start doing gigs over there and get thrown in jail every day. He was in that zone that I'm just going to go berserk on everybody.
No, I still remember that when it was going to shut down, the Bombay Rock Association had like this protest at Azad Maidan, and there were like maybe 7 of us.
And at that point, it was just too small. It was too niche. We would have had to be a movement across the country with 500,000 people losing their shit because Rang Bhavan has been shut down, for somebody to take notice.
You're more likely to hear rock and roll on the streets of Shillong than the latest Hindi film music. The city has produced some phenomenal talents in rock and roll, blues, and even extreme metal. The popularity of Western music in the city goes back many decades, and it forms an important part of the community there.
Over here, everybody has an interest in Western music. We come from a place where there's 400, 500 tribes, each with their own dialect, each with their own language, and it's difficult, to communicate with each other. So we had to use English. That was the reason why Western music was the music that actually united, the different peoples of the Northeast.
The second reason would be it's a town for education, So we have students coming in from everywhere, and that brings in all the different cultures. So I think that and all the effects of Christianity and all that thrown into one has made Shillong take to English music, Western music more than any other place in the Northeast.
2, 3, 4.
Back then, in the 70s when I was growing up, those days in Shillong, we used to have a lot of faiths, as in fairs, but mini fairs. Each locality would have a faith to try and raise funds for the locality for whatever purposes, And invariably, there would be the band playing, because the band was the main draw.
That was probably the best thing that ever happened to music our side. There's no doubt about it. That was the best thing that ever happened.
And those days, bands like The Blood and Thunder, The Living Dead, Super Sound Factory, Generation of Love and Peace. There were a lot of bands, and pretty good bands, like rock bands.
You must have heard the stories of bands having to play one song like 20 times over the night, So that was a great way for the bands to really hash their stuff out. And you could play the same song 20 different ways. No one cared.
And so my mum would give me like 1 rupee or 2 rupees. And I would use that for like an entry. And I'd be right in the front, like up front of the stage, looking at these guys up there. One day I'm going to be up there on that stage.
When we were growing up, the image of a musician wasn't a very good image. He was the guy who had perhaps a very loose lifestyle. He was the guy who drank quite a bit. I guess that image stayed for a very, very long time, till Great Society came along. And that way, I think every musician in the Northeast, owes a lot to Lou.
A name synonymous with rock and roll in Shillong and skin-tight shorts. Okay, maybe not that second bit, is Lou Majau. Ma Lou, as he is reverently called, has played in some of the city's most famous bands. Perhaps none more than Great Society. He's held a festival in tribute of Bob Dylan for many decades, and also wears mismatched socks.
He was the guy who brought in discipline into music. He said that you never go to office drunk. You don't come for rehearsals drunk. Before the gig, during the gig, you're sober. After the gig, what you did was your business. He didn't interfere. But he brought some discipline into the music scene. And I guess that discipline that he brought, that commitment that he demanded out of all of us, changed the image of musicians insofar as the public perception was concerned.
We were always in awe of that guy. I mean, he was a hero, you know, because we had never, like I'm saying, people back home, they're really shy when they get on stage because they don't get to interact with audiences often. You don't get to play in front of audiences often. And then comes Lou, and he's just a total extrovert. When he's on stage, he just doesn't give a damn about what's happening. It's just the music takes him somewhere, and he just goes with it, you know. And I have not seen, forget about our side, I had never seen a performer like him in the whole country.
It's like a torture chamber, you know. He's very particular, in fact. Like, you can't just throw in any effects that, you know, guitar player comes and play. So like that, it's been a big learning experience.
And he loved Bob Dylan. He loved the message that Bob Dylan was giving. And I think with Bob Dylan, perhaps lyrics also started becoming important to a lot of the musicians here. Otherwise, everybody was singing about love and was singing thing, and always inspired by some woman or the other, or women be inspired by some man or the other. That would be what most of the songs were. But with the introduction of Bob Dylan, through Lou, bands started, perhaps, not bands, but musicians, started seeing that, yeah, maybe we can write about serious stuff as well.
Everything was just really moving forward, and suddenly there was like a full stop.
Insurgency in the 1990s brought Shillong's music scene to a complete standstill. The few opportunities that musicians had in Shillong became pretty much non-existent. There was violence on the streets and people were afraid to go out.
Insurgency happened for over 3 or 4 years, but it probably took us back 10 or 15 years at that point in time. Because faith stopped then. That was the worst thing that ever happened to the music scene, to the scene in Shillong in general.
Because people with money never dared to show that they had money. If they showed that they had money, immediately militants would go and demand their piece of the pie, you know? And because nobody was willing to show that they had money, the funding and financing just died a natural death.
It really set us back like big time, and I think we haven't recovered from that till today.
Some bands decided to use the tension to write music. Snow White's music is full of angst against the system and the social trauma that the geopolitics of the region has caused.
Much of the content in the album is very much autobiographical, as much as, you know, it's also fiction. It's a story of one particular character whose name is Randaji. And you know, it starts with him being a child. Of course, it goes on to him being pessimistic.
He looks at the society and he sees all
negativity in it. Therefore, you know, the first negative thing that he sees is the corruption in society. And there is, you know, that social message. That,
the 5 gods.
The 5-year gods.
5-year gods. Yeah.
In general, the politicians also, you know, he decides to fight back, but in his fight against, you know, the 5-year gods, then you know, he falters, he fails, he dies. But the song, the 7th song is about, you know, it's no longer about the character, it's about the object that he had used to counter or to fight these 5-year gods. So the focus shifts to his sword, not him anymore. And the sword is left there, okay, for us, for you, for me to actually pick it up again.
dark themes have been reflected in Shillong's rock scene for many years through heavy metal. The city has some of the country's finest metal bands, and its metal legacy goes back decades. One of the earliest Shillong metal bands was Adremalek. They were pretty damn dark and projected this dark image by posing in graveyards and even jamming in haunted houses.
Tell me about like the first sort of Adremalek jam. You know, when you got together with all of these musicians and started playing the songs. What was it like?
There was this room. It was an abandoned house actually, which was supposed to be haunted. So nobody wanted to stay in that house. So we moved in and started cleaning up the walls of all the creepers and this and that, and brought in the system and started jamming, and there was no complaints from anyone. So we took up the house, and that's how it came about. We had 3 or 4 amps, 100-watt amps, I think. I remember Stranger amps or something. There were a few, 2 or 3 rotten guitars and some rusted drums. So that was the starting point.
Promoting rock and roll in Shillong is a tough business. Today, the music scene in Shillong relies heavily on the government's Arts and Culture Department. The department puts together festivals and administers the State Central Library, which is the venue for many events in the city, one of the few available locations for bands to play live.
We need all kinds of venues in Shillong. That's the only thing that's lacking right now. It's like getting a venue, like the State Central Library, where the only auditorium we have. Even if I book it for 2 months in advance and I get the venue and I pay for it, if the government wants it back tomorrow, like if my show's today and they want it back today, they take it, and we because that's the rule, and we've signed for that.
A lot of people automatically associate Shillong as a rock capital of India, but when they come, where are the live acts? There are no live acts. So my submission to the government has been that why don't you create 5 or 6 venues where there are live bands which perform every week or twice a week, and it should be mandatory on the bars to pay these musicians, and the government can supplement and pay the bars instead.
Yeah. I think things are looking up here. Things are really looking up. From what I know, the director of Art and Culture was told by the Chief Minister that she has to do 150 shows in one financial year, which is super, you know. I don't think anyone has ever been given an order like that where you have to do this many shows.
A unique platform put together by the Meghalaya AIDS Control Society is the Meghalaya Icon. It's a Battle of the Bands event where the winning band goes around the various villages in Meghalaya and spreads AIDS control awareness.
Actually, Meghalaya Icon started as like a very urban-centric kind of concept because Western music and bands playing and all that. So we said, okay, chalo, let's give it a shot and see what happens. The more interesting work was after Meghalaya Icon. Like when we crowned the first Meghalaya Icon, we took this band and we went to all the places.
Winning that was one experience. And the second thing is the traveling with the people from Meghalaya AIDS Control Society to all the villages, like meeting different people and like interacting with them, sharing with them about the subject, and then singing for them on the roadside. You know, just guitars and on the roadside with a horn and one microphone, singing for them, and like, you know, the whole year through we had programs like in different villages.
We had to visit a lot of these red light areas and truck drivers and all. Those guys, they're pretty ignorant. They don't know anything about AIDS and all that stuff. Yeah. They think that they got AIDS from, you know, consuming wrong medicines and all that stuff. They are completely oblivious to
the subject, like to the reality of the virus.
Meghalaya Icon itself changed a lot in a sense of competition, you know. Like before that we had very small competition, and that's the first competition like with such a big amount like prize money, you know. Before that it was always small, and you know getting that giving that kind of money like to the bands and everything will help them a lot, because you know before that even us to tell you like we never had good gears, we never had this kind of things because we can't afford that, you know. Like winning that, at least it helped us to buy good gears, to get good stuff to play and everything.
Until the late 70s, Calcutta was a hub for Western music in India. Jazz groups, rock bands, crooners, and other entertainers played to packed houses at Trinkas, Mocambo, and Blue Fox. Legends like Usha Uthup and Louis Banks were born here. But due to a variety of factors, most prominently being the departure of the Anglo-Indians, Western music in the city took a major hit. While all of this was going on, a whole new genre was being created by the fusion of local Bengali folk music and the rock and roll stylings of artists like Bob Dylan. It was most famously propagated by a man called Gautam Chattopadhyay of the band Mohener Ghodaguli.
Gautam has always been like a legendary figure in Calcutta and Bengal. And he had this band in the 70s which unfortunately didn't do too well in the 70s because people were not ready for that genre.
I would say back then when they had started that, obviously as people say that it was way ahead of its time, and I would absolutely agree because if you listen to the kind of music that was happening here, the mainstream Bengali, the very melodious, nice songs, and from there to the kind of stuff they were doing, that was like this huge jump. So after they had disbanded, after Mohener Ghodaguli, the band had disbanded, say in the early 80s, their songs kind of lived among these people, It was like, different college canteens. In different colleges, people would sing them and, some people didn't even know whose song they were.
So he decided to bring it back again in the early 90s.
And brought many musicians on the platform named Mohener Ghodaguli Sampadito Bangla Gan.
So it was a regular thing that at his place musicians would go and jam, and he'd organize these little cozy get-togethers. And at one of these parties, he kind of popped the proposal that, would you guys be interested in collaborating with me on one song? I said, yeah, okay, let's hear it. So he took an acoustic guitar and he strummed the intro to that now so very famous song, Prithibi.
নাকি ছোট হতে হতে স্যাটেলাইট আর কেবলের হাতে ড্রয়িং রুমে রাখা বোকা বাক্সতে বন্দি
Prithibi happened. Prithibi was a composition by Gautam Chattopadhyay, and Crosswinds performed recorded that song. Crosswinds was also a new band back then.
I learned a lot by watching him, and just because of his cool demeanor and the way he interacted with musicians, he would get the best performance from every musician. He had this very funny style of working where he would not plan. He said, just play what you feel like, go by feel, go by gut instinct. Everybody ended up playing nicely, everybody was relaxed, and there was no pressure of, you got to really nail it, and if the clock is ticking, we got to stop by 9, none of that. So that was the beginning of our thing with him.
Crosswinds are one of the most popular groups of the Bangla rock scene. At the height of their popularity, they even performed at Independence Rock in Mumbai at Rang Bhavan in 1994.
Do you remember Rang Bhavan?
Of course, that's one of the best memories I have, going and playing there, because it's a very special venue, as you know. It has this mojo to it. It's really special. I had planned that I'm going to do something really radical which people will remember for a long time. So it occurred to me that nobody has ever covered the national anthem. It being 15th of August, nobody even mentions it in their opening thing to the audience. So we were going on stage and the audience were totally pissed. They're looking and Banerjee, Mukherjee, so I said, man, there's only one way to silence them. Just went to the amp, the Marshall amp, and cranked it. And I gave them a full-on, I laid out all my chops on the carpet. It was like killer. I just went for it, and after a while, they realized this guy's playing the national anthem. So that was like something happened, and what was like a violent mob, in one flash change, and they were all waving the national flag, and there was happiness all around, and we won the crowd over in one split second. But it doesn't end with that. I even destroyed the guitar that day. So I had this really crappy local guitar which I never played. I said, okay, we're sacrificing it for a good cause. So we did the whole Pete Townshend who thing where we throw it up, smash it. The pickups came flying out. The audience got a couple of nice magnetic pickups thrown at them. Some knobs went this way. The neck went there. It was full-on party.
By the early 90s, Bangla rock was coming into the spotlight. Bands like Chandrabindu, Cactus, Abhilasha, and Paras Pathor started fusing Bengali lyrics and folk stylings with rock and roll. writing and performing original music to growing audiences. One of the most prominent groups of that era, who still perform today, is Fossils.
People were talking about our music, they were appreciating, as well as some were saying that this album is very heavy. We didn't consider that album to be heavy. We thought, let's make a proper heavy album and show them what a heavy Bangla rock can be.
It was called F2. F1, when we recorded, we thought that F2 was, we thought that, okay, people are listening to our music. So we can go all out. We can do what we want to do. Really, we came out with something really heavy and really in your face. And I think that brashness, from that second album, that brashness got into Bengali music. From that second album.
Bangla rock has been able to reach heights of popularity that few forms of Western music have been able to in India. But it too has had its ups and downs, with local Bengali film music stealing the spotlight from it in the past few years.
What has happened now is the whole thing had this upward rising graph, popularity-wise also, with the media being there, and say, I think 2005 to 2009, that period, I think it kind of reached its peak. Now what has happened is obviously you have the film industry's become very big here.
Film music has come back in a really big way in Bengal. So all the media attention, all the thing goes to film music.
You don't really have any local channels that play non-film music like that, or you don't have radio channels also. Maybe some are still playing a bit.
The thing is that we never got any support from the media or like that sort of a support like a film music or whatever. But media had to come to us because we were big.
So I think we desperately need a music channel here that plays non-film, People here, like the bands here, the Bengali rock bands at least, they are like, we were kind of used to getting that attention, you know what I'm saying? From all the corners. So that's kind of changed now. Maybe it's, the musicians have to do something together.
Be it rock and roll in Mumbai, blues in Shillong, or a brand new genre of music in Bengal, Western music in India was slowly finding footholds around the country. While it was still difficult for musicians in the 80s to think of pursuing music as a career, the 90s would bring about changes that would greatly accelerate the growth of this music scene. They would capture the imaginations of musicians everywhere and set a few of them on the road to rock stardom.